there's a war going on right now. Right now. You can study that war and see what a bad idea it was to attack Iraq.
Yeah, and it's really, I hope you write about this because I don't think others have. It's such a good point that a lot of the miscalculations that Putin made are very similar to the ones Trump made. That, not unlike Hitler, what did Hitler said? I will just kick in the door and walk into Russia. And if you look at the initial full-scale invasion, what they calculated, how they thought that Ukraine would fall. Now, I have to say, as somebody who's been spending a good bit of time in Ukraine lately and was walking around to some of these early battles, it is extraordinary how close that was. Had this thing gone a little bit differently, had Ukrainians not risen up as they did, and people, walking out of their advertising agencies and picking up automatic weapons and going to defend, maybe the Russians could have seized Kyiv, but it didn't work. And now they have less territory than they had after the first 2 months of the war.
I remember watching that and writing about the attack on Ukraine, and that Planet whatever labs or whatever satellite company had satellite pictures of that Russian convoy coming from Belarus.
Right.
If you're a general officer in an army, that is the satellite picture you want to see. A road filled with armor and gasoline trucks and trucks carrying infantry and ammunition supply trucks and everything. It's just a gigantic long, whatever it was, 70-mile long target.
Yeah.
And didn't any of them look at what happened in the first Gulf War when the Iraqis tried to escape from Kuwait, and we just slammed that road?
Highway of death.
Yeah, until we got embarrassed about it and stopped. Yeah. I mean, it was just a murder zone, and that's what the Ukrainians did to the Russian column, except from the ground instead of from the air. And they just used. I just love to think of the RPG. It's like It's like $125 weapon that fires a $20 warhead. And that's what the Ukrainians used to stop the Russian army. RPGs and Kalashnikovs. Both of those weapons were invented and have been in use by militaries around the world since the 1940s. Those are old weapons. And they're still so good, they could stop the Russian army from Kyiv. And all you have to do is hit a tanker truck with an RPG and boom. Gone. All you have to do is hit one of these light armored vehicles with an RPG, it's gone. Not to mention some Humvee or something like that.
Yeah.
That's what they used against us in Iraq. They used Kalashnikovs and RPGs. And we were in there. I mean, what did we have? We had F-18s, F-14s, F-16s, Abrams tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles and this and that and the other thing. And are we there? No, we're not there.
Yeah.
We had the same thing in Afghanistan. Afghanistan didn't. The Taliban didn't have a single jet, not one. And they ran us out of that country. And, you don't even have to study military history. All you have to do is study recent mistakes to see why we shouldn't have done anything at all to Iran except start the negotiation that they're in now back in February. I mean, they should have started negotiating with Iran over what to do with its nuclear program back then. They should have, gone to wherever, Washington, D.C., and knocked on John Kerry's door and said,
yeah, I mean, the deal they're trying to get back to isn't as good as the deal that we had.
No.
Um,
And Kerry spent 2 years of his life, 2 years, flying back and forth. And,
yeah,
it just, and he's a serious guy.
yeah.
I've known him for a long time. I used to live with his sister. You want to talk about small worlds,
Didn't know that.
I lived with Peggy. And so I knew John really well. I spent Christmas and Thanksgiving with him every year. And he's a serious, serious guy. He's well educated, well read in history.
Yeah,
He has the life that he's lived since he was educated, in the Senate and, all the Secretary of State, all the things that he's done. And he did as good a job as you could do with the Iranians. And, and it took him 2 years because the Iranians will just sit there and talk, that's what they do. They talk. And
well,
they'll talk about this, they'll talk about that. They'll string it out and string it out and string it out because they know that after a while will go away. They've been there for thousands of years, but we haven't.
Yeah, and the idea that, sort of who can withstand the most economic pain, I think the country that doesn't have elections, the people, even if they're very unhappy, they're not going to vote the people out. I think I can I don't know. I'm thinking maybe like North Korea could do it, absorb more pain.
I don't think there are headlines in Iran about gas prices.
Yeah, I don't really. You have a totalitarian society. I mean, it's the same what's happening in Russia. The 50% of the economy is now going to the war. Now, how long can that be sustained? At some point, I think the oligarchs do revolt because it's going to affect their personal lifestyle. But it's just extraordinary. And so let me ask you this. Do you think that we'll end up sending ground troops in some capacity?
No, we don't. I don't know. I mean, I guess those generals will sit there and salute and do whatever they're told. But how many ground troops do we have over there? They keep using this figure of 50,000. But out of the 50,000, most of them are staff people and support people. And, they sent about 10,000 Marines and 82nd guys over there. And it would take 10,000 soldiers if this town that I live in with about 10,000 residents were armed. Well, they are well armed with light weapons, but if they were armed like an army, it would take more than 10,000 people to overrun this little town. And you got a country of 92 million people. I just wake up every single day and the thing that pops into my head is, are they kidding? Are they kidding? Who do they think they're kidding?